Yep.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brett Johnson. I'm the Senior Associate Director of the Northwestern University Transportation Center. And with me, I have Joan Pinnell, who is our Assistant Director of Communications. And everyone knows as well, our moderator of Sandhouse meetings, Norm Carlson. Before I hand it over to you, Norm, to introduce our speaker, which is kind of an annual rite of passage for our first Sandhouse meeting of the year. I just want to let everyone know in the audience that at the end of the presentation, we will take questions and answers, and you can send questions and answers using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So with that, again, welcome to Sandhouse, and I would like to introduce Norm Carlson.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you, Joan, for setting all of this up. As we all know, Jim Derwinski is the CEO and Executive Director of Metra. He has been with Metra since 1997. He joined Metra as a diesel electrician and has come up through the mechanical department ranks. And before becoming CEO, he was our Chief Mechanical Officer. And I think we're blessed with him having that experience because right now we are just, the board just approved a major coach car procurement. We also have new locomotives, or I should say remanufactured locomotives on order. And rolling stock is a big part of what we're dealing with at Metra these days. So with that, Jim, please let's update everyone on what's happening at Metra.
Thank you, Norm, and I hope everybody can hear and see. I love this technology stuff. No, I don't. I actually prefer in-person meetings. I prefer, looking in people's eyes and really communicating the way we're all meant to communicate. This is functional, and that's why we do this kind of stuff. And I hope today is informative. Hope today you don't have technical difficulties, but we'll do the best we can. And I really do appreciate you, Norm, and Northwestern, Brett, inviting us here as, we're an integral part of the community. And I think you'll hear a little bit more about that today because I have what I hope you'll be all excited about, some updates. So, got to do the old other part of all this. Okay. Everybody see that? I just need one yes.
Looks good.
All right. So here we go. My Metra, right at the top. What's it about? That's what I really want to talk to everybody about. Why we're here, what this means, and why it fits so critically with where Metra's at today in the world. So a little bit of background, and I'm going to do a lot of reading of slides today that I typically don't do. I'll also enhance the reading with a lot of talking, but I put a lot of this stuff out because it is such an interesting format. I think in a lot of ways, different people register things different ways. Sometimes I've been told I talk a little fast, and if something's not in front of them or I can't really engage people through the normal audience way, I figured I'll put a lot of it out in writing. So really, after 5 years of consecutive decline in ridership, I really set the stage in late 2019 that we absolutely, most certainly must do something different. So once again, take yourself back to 2019, the end of 2019, Metra is now seeing a decline in ridership overall on the system for 5 straight years. So we've obviously taken a look at the consumer needs are changing. What does that relate to city travel? What does it relate to discretionary travel? Lower fuel prices became, a normalcy at that point in time, making automobiles and fuel efficient automobiles, much more advantageous and in a lot of respects more flexible than a traditional commuter train. And we've been providing service to the region, but we have not been aggressively marketing our sales and our rides. We've had some minor marketing programs. We had some minor, ad campaigns, but we really hadn't dove in yet and said, well, what should we do differently? And that was my key driver in all this. We need to do something differently. We can't just either hold the price or raise the price and add one train here or do something else there. Now, let's be clear about something. We were involved in, and Norm had a big deal to do with this, the reverse market campaign we were working on with Lake County Partners. That actually was starting to really kick it in gear, almost to the point where we were going to start enhancing that service. So there was one initiative that did happen but it wasn't the whole system, but it was a piece of what we were looking at. So as we entered the end of 2019, I wanted to start taking a little different control of something that we were going to try differently. Now, our marketing budget had really shrunk over the years. We get backed into a financial corner every single year with regard to our 50-50 recovery ratio. So I wanted to, and I asked the board in the 2018 to 2019 and 2019 to 2020 budget process to increase the amount of money that we had available to do some marketing. And one of the things I really wanted to do was take a look at us internally. And I wanted us to take a look at what we are good at. So we got busy. And one of the things I did is I asked a local marketing firm to come in and take a good look at us. You know, when you're in a business, any business, you really know what you know, but sometimes you really don't have a handle on what your customers think of you. And in Metra's case, our customers are not just our passengers, our customers are every single taxpayer in the region. So I wanted us to take a very thorough look at what others think of us. So I hired this local company to come in and hold some workshops. At the time, we called them clarity workshops, and not a lot of people even understood, even to this day, why we called them clarity workshops. But I wanted them to help us through these workshops identify what are we good at. I wanted them to identify where our passions are, because that's important, I think, in growing your business and growing a brand of your business. So people don't just use you because you're the alternative. They use you because you're the best alternative. Mostly we compete with automobiles. See where our opportunities are and give us a perspective from the passenger and a public point of view. The one thing I loved about this company is all of their employees rode Metra. So they had this perception of Metra. They had this experience with Metra. They had a little bit of the history, but they had no idea of what it looked like to be inside Metra. So I invited them in. Company's called LKH&S. They've done marketing with many big companies here in Chicago and actually nationwide. I took a look at some of the work they've done, and I asked them to do something they never did, to hold these workshops where they could actually help synthesize what I just pointed out up there. And so in about October, November of 2019, we started the process. We started holding these workshops, started with every single executive. Then we moved it out to all the people that had forward-facing public actions, not every single person, but the representatives of passenger services, of the GPS center, the people that are selling tickets, and certainly conductors and our marketing people and our government affairs people that engage the public. What are we gonna do? How are we gonna make this look differently? Once again, we got busy. We conducted some rider research. What we did initially once we started synthesizing out what we're good at and start bubbling up, and you'll get to some of this in a second, we actually wanted to know what the riders did. And we wanted to set some benchmarks. So they actually ended up doing some surveys, and I'll show you that in a second here. We held these internal meetings. They were multi-layer, multi-days, and we really started talking about the brand architecture and what do people think Metra when they think of Metra. And truthfully, it's a lot of different things. If you're a rider, you might think something different than a non-rider. If you're a worker downtown, or if you're a casual rider, and if you're just a resident that benefits from Metra because you happen to have a restaurant near one of our stations, you might think something totally different about Metra. And if you're an elected official, you might have something totally different. So the goal was to develop a campaign that would be authentic, have meaning to the internal stakeholders, have meaning to our riders, and to the state itself, the state and the elected officials. So you can see here, these are the things we came up with. And I just want to be very clear, the artist renditions are just stuff pulled off the internet. This has nothing to do with the campaign, but this is what we actually took to our riders. We actually went to stations, and believe it or not, this was done the first week of March of 2020. A lot of people know what happened in March of 2020. So right as COVID was hitting, right as we are starting to understand and hear all this, we were actually able to get all this in to our passengers before our passengers left the trains. And what it came down to, the way the Be Driven, my Empower, Metra, and You, it finally concluded with my Metra resonated with the passengers the most. It had an internal component and an external component. From a likelihood standpoint, what ended up happening was my Metra took the highest marks, And from the one that says disliked it, it really didn't even register. So we took that messaging and we started to build on that from the start, the beginning of the campaign. So what is My Metra? It's the story, hang on a second, I gotta move some here. It's the story of My Metra that's been introduced both to the public and already within Metra. My Metra stands for the center of everything that we believe. That's what the workshops really identified. What is our core beliefs? What's our passion? My Metra is also an initiative and an attitude. It's really about how we want to address everything with our passengers. My Metra is also a belief and a philosophy. It's kind of deep there, but it's kind of true. The way you get people to follow you somewhere is you get them to understand why they want to go there. And that's what the philosophy part of it is. And it gives rise to our mission and acts as a compass for every daily decision the agency makes. And you'll see that through the messaging that we started. So in Ernst, we actually kicked this off somewhere around the May timeframe. The board, I went to the board and approved a contract with LKHS, multi-year contract for LKHS to really work on My Metra. But more so than anything, right at that point in time, we had to pivot from a 5-year decline in ridership, you'll see here, to dealing with the coronavirus. So My Metra is about taking personal responsibility for our riders and for each other. These pictures you now see are Metra employees, and everything you'll see from here on out is Metra employees. We've identified that they are our core. They are the reason that we exist, and they are the reason that people either have a great experience or a bad experience. They also are the reasons internally that we support each other. And that's what really this is all about, supporting each other. If you've ever worked at Metra, and I know some people on the call did, what we really are doing here is breaking down all the silos inside our interdepartment problems. For consumers on the outside, My Metra acts as that promise for two things. First, the riders can depend on Metra to always get them to and from where they want to go and the places they love the most safely. But second, it's also a reminder that My Metra is the entire region. It's an asset of the state of Illinois, technically, but at the end of the day, My Metra affects everybody. It affects people, whether they're going to and from their school and they're not having to wait in all that congested traffic, because Metra pre-COVID was able to take 1,000 people off that road and put them on a train and run them downtown. My Metra is a source of getting people to good paying jobs. My Metra is a way to alleviate emissions footprints. There's nobody better and cleaner than really commuter trains, other than you walking. But if you're going to walk from Naperville in, you might as well start yesterday. So it's all about how it plays out to the consumer and certainly to the elected official as well. We put together a business strategy, and the business strategy had all of these components with communications, and you see how many different places we can touch. So internally, once again, our employees, we got a bunch of our employees that were selected by other employees, and these posters are all over Metra, and they're going to change about every 6 to 9 months. And they're all about sending that message to employees that you teach, you care, you finish. And it's all about having that ability to connect. This isn't just Jim Durwinsky talking. This isn't Bruce Marchese talking. This isn't a board member talking. This is your coworker talking. A little bit on the bottom that you can't read is a little bit about who they are, where they work, and how long they've been here as well. Their images appear everywhere on Metra now, everywhere on our websites, on our VINs, what's called visual information networks. We're building team captains. But once again, this thing really started in Ernst in about April, and it started taking off in May. And that's also when we had to not only work on this internal piece, but start pivoting really closely with the COVID piece. Then the pandemic hit. Illinois enacted the stay-at-home plan. Ridership dropped over 90%. Our worst day, we were down 97.2%. That was April 16th. Instead of running a campaign we wanted, we did pivot. So we conducted more research. The initial research was about My Metra and the campaign that we wanted to roll forward, but now we needed research to understand rider sentiment, concerns they felt, when they might return. Obviously, a lot of the discussions that we had last year, 2 weeks, 2 months, quarantine, this will go away by summer, none of that matters. It was all wrong. Everybody's been wrong about everything they said about COVID, and everything that everybody says about COVID today, they will be wrong again, because there's so much still we don't know. The point is, we had to reach out back to the riders that were still on the train, and even some of the riders that left, to understand what their concerns are. So we launched what was going to be considered a campaign about commute with confidence. This is what the riders said. 64% said, and by the way, this was May of 2020, 64% back then said they were going to come back in by August. 72% said they're going to return within a few weeks of their call back to their employer. 2/3 said they were going to return to public transportation, while 1/3 said, at least for a while, they're going to do drive, carpool, or rideshare. 30% of respondents claim they will ride Metra less. Probably true. Physical distancing is the most significant concern. On board hand sanitizers was the #1 desired safety protocol they wanted to see. No more than one person per seat. 16% of riders who currently do not use the app claim they will download it. That's so they can have a touchless experience when they do fare validation. These same results, for the most part, were mirrored in Philadelphia and Los Angeles. So there's a tension here, right? There's the fear of coming back, and then there's the habit. You know, everything we provided pre-COVID, value, speed, efficiency, stress reduction, and conservation, we still are good at that, but they had a fear about their personal health and fear about health of others. So we put together this campaign. It's called Commute with Confidence. And so it starts with all of these key elements in there, like we talked about, the things that matter to them. 1 person per seat, hand sanitizer dispensers are now on every single train car. We emphasize airflow, and we'll talk about that in a second. The touchless ticketing. We've been since June offering a $10 all-day pass, and the $10 all-day pass is, you know, so that we can encourage people to go ahead and use the app more often. And then the benefits of the fresh air, and then all our cleaning commitments that definitely is definitely something that we had to do. So I'm going to go through a little bit of it. This is where all the signage sits on each and every one of our cars, all very much unique. The color patterns you see here are to pull people's eyes to this is the new thing, committed to cleaning, sanitizing. We fog the cars every single day. Masks are a must. Riding together, but sitting apart. We've had a lot of other conversations about that whole dynamic as we move past COVID. Staying seated, stay safe, stay there. You don't have to get up and get all bunched up to your fellow riders on the train. Keep the social distancing. We have hand sanitizers on every single car. Breathe easy. We're using hospital grade air filters, and touch less, pay less. So these are plastered all over the car. This is just showing the fact, and these are facts, on our cars, we replace the air every 4 minutes. And that's a big thing. We all know that now is a big thing. We saw that in summer when the curves went down because people were more apt to be outside. We also know in winter, when you go in your house or you go in other smaller confined spaces where airflow is not prevalent or as prevalent, at least not this, where you're cycling the air 15 times an hour, that's a big deal. So we wanted to emphasize this. And we also built a dashboard. This was from our planning department. What it does is it gives you the ability to go on our website, pick the train you want, and you could see the average ridership on that train last week. And so that gives you the ability, if you're going to come back to Metra and start choosing us again a day or two or try us out, you can see, is this a green train? Does it have ample room on it? Is it yellow? Is it orange? And certainly if it gets to red, we're going to add more cars, or we're going to actually add another train. Right now, everything is either yellow or green. So My Metra, Commute with Confidence. That's the name of the campaign. That's the campaign that's out right now. And one of the things we did with that is we actually started using media in a different way. Our message was first, we need to recover. And then eventually we'll start reclaiming some of our riders. And eventually we're going to rise. That was what we hired LKH&S to originally do. So we're clearly right now still in the recovery stage. How long will that last? We all want to know that. We have different ways of targeting our media. So we have earned, owned, paid. In this particular case, for the first time in a long time, we actually started doing some paid media. Social media is, the one that you kind of own. You really don't pay for anything. Obviously, we've been speaking with the public, but this is the first time in a long time that we started doing radio ads and TV ads. So I'd like to show you a couple of those, what we've been doing to really start getting our message out. Now, some of these date back to summertime, but we still see them playing out there now.
When it comes to commuting, we know you're concerned. But on My Metra, we're committed to your safety. Every day, we're sanitizing and disinfecting our trains. We use hospital-grade air filters. You'll find hand sanitizer on board. Masks are mandatory. we're practicing physical distancing and giving you extra time at your station, all to get you to work or home safely and on time. You see, we're still your best way to commute. That's why it really is my Metra for all of us.
So that rolled out in the early summer, and it continues. I see it every once in a while as I'm channel surfing.
Are you heading back to work? Let My Metra take you there. I'm Ayana Walker, a compliance specialist with My Metra. Every day, we have dedicated crews hard at work sanitizing, disinfecting, and deep cleaning our trains and stations. You see, it's not enough to get you back to work on time. We're going to get you there safely. Your well-being is our number one concern. So why waste time and money sitting in traffic when you can commute with confidence on My Metra?
So there's a lot of conversation. These have been rolling out for a while. There's a lot of conversation about, is it the right time to spend? Is it not the right time to spend? And I'm going to tell you, we stood behind the decision that it was the right time to spend. It's never too early in my estimation, and I believe our board's estimation, and I believe a lot of people that we work with, it's never too early to start telling people about what you're doing, because we don't know when those riders are going to come back. We're not sure if they're going to come back 1 day a week, 2 days a week, what uncertainty they have. We know every single person's website's loaded with stuff, but the fact of the matter is, in the background, My Metra is going to be there for you. So we had also a highly targeted and efficient media where we use the digital stuff. And so we're, using the billboards, talking your radio in your car, and then your computer at home, and depends what you're surfing. Some of the results that we got for those are pretty impressive. I'll touch that in a second. We also went to these big billboards. So we have 31 out there, and then some static ones as well. And we hit all the pinch points. As a lot of you may or may not know, if you're on the roads, traffic has not alleviated. It's about 95% of pre-pandemic levels on the roads with respect to congestion. However, the big difference is the speeds are up also probably another 30%. So crashes, when they happen, they're horrible. And therefore, then the delay gets impressive. So as more and more people come back to work, they're going to seek alternatives to get downtown. They may not come downtown 5 days a week, but when they do, our billboards are in their face, letting them know what we've already done. And there'll be more of this coming. So commute with confidence, committed to cleaning. And once again, these are our employees demonstrating the work that they've done. Here's also the social media. In some cases, depending how you're searching, you can pick up little snippets like this as well.
On My Metra, we're committed to your safety. We're sanitizing and disinfecting every day. We're practicing physical distancing, and masks are a must. There's even hand sanitizer on board. So commute with confidence on My Metra.
And then our website, it's really our brand hub for all communications. It's completely loaded up with a whole COVID page, all the things we're doing. We're starting to tell the employees stories. We're telling about My Metra, and we're going to enhance this as we start seeing the ridership return and our presence in the region regain its complete value that we know it's there. All the things we did was some My Metra masks, some hand sanitizer, and we're constantly working on little ideas. And we did things hand out at the stations with the masks and the sanitizer to the passengers. So what did it look like? So when they start telling me stuff like it had 277 plus million impressions, I sit back and I take notice. I'm like, wow, that hit a lot of things. And when they say it has an average frequency of 13.3 seconds, that's high. I get it. In this world, there's a lot of people that just zip, 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 zip. But it looks like people have actually been taking a good look at some of our stuff, and more to come, definitely more to come. So we also been trying to leverage influential Chicagoans and politicians. Two of the ones that we have on their website right now, on the left there is Jackie Collins' website, and on the right is Sophia King, Fourth World Alderman's website. They were able to partner with us, and we've got more coming where we, on their websites, Metra's message is out there as well. In September, we held a press conference. And when we held this press conference, we did it at Western Avenue. We invited 31 press members to come in. And I want to talk about this for a second because of how effective it was. When they came in, we actually were all over the news that day. We were on everything from the 11 to the 10 o'clock news at night. We had question and answers. We were able to demonstrate our commercials. We had cleaning supplies set up left to right. We had the media go in and film and talk to coach cleaners, talk to supervisors, actually see the fogging guns we did. And we had a bunch of articles get published on it. So the real question is, was it effective? And the answer is the next 2 weeks, week over week, we had 10% rise in ridership to the point where we had our highest numbers by the end of September. Unfortunately, at that point in time, the COVID numbers started creeping up, the positivity rate was creeping up, and we saw a decline. And then the next big decline we saw was when the governor shut down all restaurants, and we basically lost all restaurant workers. So at this point in time, we've been kind of stagnant, hovering around 10% of ridership that was pre-COVID. But someday we're not going to talk about pre-COVID ridership because it's not going to matter anymore, because as we evolve from this pandemic, we are going to look different. We're going to have different train schedules. We're going to have different things that drive the way we operate the system. On March 11th, right now, officially, it hasn't been announced, so you guys are getting a preview of this. Our plan is to have our next big event. By special invitation only, HR and C-suite leaders from Chicago businesses operating the Central Business District will learn, kind of similar to what we did with the media, how business can and come back safely as the COVID-19 concerns go away. There's no crystal ball here. Last year, when we talked to the business community, they said we might have our people back in Labor Day. No, November, January 21. So that needle keeps moving. Why? Because like I said, everybody was wrong and nobody's going to be right, even what they say today. But what we're going to do is, once again, put that message out there. We may end up running more than one event. We may end up running one event, and we may see the fruits of some businesses wanting to get their people back downtown and have this dialogue and the messaging and toolkits that they get. And definitely, you know, working with their HR departments, we believe is going to be the key. And there may be other events down the road as this evolves. So My Metra shared essential resource for our community. That kind of summarizes My Metra up. What I wanted to talk to you now about, and then I'll take your questions at the end, was what Norm alluded to, this exciting new rail car procurement. Briefly, in 2014, the board instructed us to modernize the fleet. They didn't just instruct us to modernize the fleet, they did an assessment of our fleet and the conditions of our bridges and stations and state of good repair needs and PTC needs back then. And they put forth what they called was the modernization plan. It's a 4-page white paper that inside there directed us to rehab more cars, rehab more locomotives, purchase locomotives, get more spare cars here, finish PTC. And the last thing on the list, which is buy new rail cars to replace some of the oldest cars. We went out for 3 procurements, 17, 18, and 19, or I think it was 16, 17, and 19. And this is the results of the 2019 procurement. It was about an 18-month process. I'm not going to get in all the details. If you really want to see a great presentation, you can go back and look in the archives of our board meeting. I'd like to give this group here today just the highlights. This is a condition rating report in general without reading any of the words. You want to be yellow, green, or blue. You don't want to be orange or red. If you're orange or red, you're well beyond useful life of vehicle and you're in marginal poor condition. That doesn't mean they're not safe, but that means a place you don't want to be. They really should be replaced. This chart kind of shows in the next 3 years what happens if we don't start buying new rail cars. In the next 3 years, all our oranges turn reds. Basically, half the fleet, almost half the fleet, is going to be over 42 years old. That's what that means. The greens fluctuate there because when we rehab a car, they go back to the green condition and then they drift back into yellow and then we rehab them again, they go to green. And the blue really means the first 14 years of life. So you don't see much blue up there. The goal is to put a bunch of blue up there. So we brought this to the board with kind of the reason we want to do this, the condition of the current fleet, some of the compliance things that matter. New cars have crash worthiness standards that old cars don't. New cars are ADA accessible, old cars aren't. New cars have enhanced emergency access, old cars don't. New cars have propulsion inhibit systems and other safety systems. And at the end of the day, they also have enhanced security. So there's so many reasons why the old cars need to go and the new cars need to get put in place, which is what our board did. Determining factors that we had here were the new cars that were finally proposed were proposed from Alstom. They had walk-through cabs. This was a critical component to us, especially as we come out of COVID. We didn't want to have cab cars that were isolated at the end of the train, which didn't allow us flexibility in the operations. Anybody that's knows anything about how we operate in the mid part of the day, we don't like to drag 9-car trains around. We'll cut those down to 4s and 5s just to save on wear and tear and expense. So that was a key consideration in determining factor. Safety. The way the cars are laid out, they're considered a traditional bi-level car, not a gallery car. They have great lines of sight. One of the other things that was considered was warranty. Alstom came in and said it's a 6-year bumper to bumper warranty. The other companies that bid on this didn't even offer that at all. They were 3 years is what the requirement was in the procurement. And then car body design, they're 100% stainless steel. Our cars are stainless steel. We look at our 1950s cars built out of stainless steel and see how that's held up over the years. We look at our carbon steel cars and we see issues. We know about people out there with aluminum bodied cars. We see issues. So we love the fact that these cars were stainless steel. And then finally, final scores. Alstom scored the highest on a value to Metra, not necessarily just price, but a value to Metra for all the determining factors and some of the other reasons. So with that, I'd like to show you a little bit of a video of what graphic guys at Alstom gave us to show you what the inside of the new cars is looking like and what they're all about.
Alstom's Coradia multi-level sets the stage for a new era in Metra commuter rail service. Passengers will enjoy an enhanced travel experience with multiple side doors on each car to improve passenger flow and reduce dwell times at stations, level boarding that promotes accessibility for all passengers while maintaining interoperability with the existing fleet. The Coradia multi-level boasts an improved stainless steel car body with a structural design meeting the latest FRA crashworthiness standards for the safest ride. Easy access to aid removal of components such as brake discs and HVAC units shorten maintenance durations. The new cab cars will feature a new expandable design for the operator. Enhanced diagnostics and connected systems mean better fleet maintenance, operations, reliability, and availability. The choices of materials, treatments, and touchless features promote easier cleaning and a sanitary interior for healthy journeys, reassuring passengers, and enhancing satisfaction. The interior offers fluidity and efficiency. Level boarding and wide vestibules promote access for persons with reduced mobility and passenger exchange. Bicycle and luggage areas enable intermobility, which can help attract new passengers and promote sustainable mobility. For passenger safety and security, centered lower level to mid-level stairs improve sight lines for Metra personnel, and CCTV reassures passengers of their safety. Passenger flows for boarding and circulation throughout the cars offer a welcoming and modern feel for Metra customers. Lifts on each car will assist persons with mobility assistance devices. ADA, fully accessible restrooms, and dedicated seating areas enhance accessibility and inclusivity for Metra passengers. The passenger is at the heart of the design, from more personal space to modern filtration systems for air quality and circulation to the latest cybersecurity technology. Features that ensure the safety and integrity of the entire train, reassure passengers, and provide a comforting environment. The open interior is flooded with natural light via large windows so riders can look outside and enjoy the passing landscape and views. The Coradia multi-level will bring a new and improved experience for commuter rail riders in Chicagoland.
Okay, and then finally, I guess just to comment on that, hope you enjoyed that. Not bad, I think 34 minutes. Unfortunately, the cars are going to take 42 months before we see the first prototypes arrive on property because they're going to have to be designed. They're going to have to go through all the FRA testing. And clearly, it's going to be an exciting time, but 42 months after we get NTP, notice to proceed, which is after all the T's and C's are crossed with all the other stakeholders, they are going to be built in Hornell, New York, and the board at this time approved the base order of 200 cars. So with that, I think I'll conclude and look forward to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for the presentation. So let me go through some of the questions we received and I'll read them to you. And I'm going to take them in order I received them. Depending on the number of questions we have today, by the way, we'll judge when we'll wrap up. but it depends on how many other questions come in. But I'm going to say we're going to wrap up sometime between 1 and 1:15 or sooner. So here we go. William Scott asks, why my versus our Metra?
Yeah, because the reason was, once again, internal and external. So my Metra, we wanted the employees to feel like I have ownership in this. And so a lot of the research in the clarity workshops that we did really resonated around multiple options. And as you saw, some of the options when we put them on the screen there, they all kind of fit internally. What we really cared about is, did they not work externally? And so my resonated the highest. It could have been our Metra, but the fact of the matter is we wanted people to, even that don't ride Metra, to understand that Metra is really their Metra as well. So my resonates very highly. There's other companies out there doing my as well, but that was the reason why we went with my.
Thanks, Jim. Ron Warnow asks, how much interaction are you continuing with other agencies to be aware of their responses to the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it continues all the time. I'm the chairman of the Commuter Rail Coalition. I meet weekly with my executive director, monthly with my board. And so we're having kind of conversations there all the time. Every quarter, we're having APTA meetings, American Public Transportation Association. So I'm constantly in communication with my peers at the other agencies. My planning people and my ops people are constantly in communication with the other agencies. We're typically talking with the biggest agencies, New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Los Angeles type people, but we're constantly in communication. And like I said, the surveys that were done last summer, we all mirrored each other. And there's interesting things that are happening right now. Like we all went to cash collection back at the same time, but there's interesting things happening right now, but almost everybody's still running either somewhat of the simulation of a reduced schedule, or possibly because of budgetary reasons, further reducing their schedule.
Deciding not to go in order of questions received, but kind of on topic related to the marketing campaign and also collaborating or talking to other agencies. Are there any joint marketing efforts by CTA, PACE, Metra, and RTA? This is from Richard Gill.
No, there's not. So it's interesting. I mean, obviously RTA, you would think, would lead this. They're not. They haven't. They support what we're doing, and we definitely have a different story to tell. When it comes to recovery, we fell, like I said, 97.7%. PACE today is sitting at 50%. CTA says they're sitting at about 60% on bus and 40% on train. So it's a different story to tell. And I think individually they have a different message out there. CTA's message is they haven't stopped running. They don't see a reason to run a campaign. PACE's problem is they had to redivert a bunch of their buses to routes that were really starting to have social distancing issues. And that's why they had to close almost half the routes. So their messaging is more with the elected officials in those communities, where our messaging is completely different. And I'll touch on one other reason why we feel our messaging campaign is so important to us. There's a huge, huge shift of people that moved very apparently out of the city in the suburbs right now. The housing market in a lot of the suburbs is on fire. And we believe we have to now start being in that position to not just welcome back old riders, but in a lot of ways try to find if in fact newer riders would be part of their Metra's part of their future, as maybe they used to be CTA riders and now they're living in, Glencoe and they want to come downtown. What does that look like? So we believe we have the biggest dynamic need to have a marketing campaign going right now.
Thank you. From Ann Hamo, she says, thank you for implementing the $10 all-day passes that truly provides vital relief to all riders and all lines. What direct call for action is Metra request of us, the commuters and community members, to support and participate in the success of My Metra now and in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing is, would love feedback. Feedback is always important. We are going to do another round of customer sentiment surveys very soon to understand whether the sentiment, obviously, that was here early in the summer of last year is the same sentiment now. You've got vaccinations going on. You've got numbers, going up, going down. So it's very important that people participate in surveys and get the feedback, bump your neighbor, talk to your, whoever. The more participants you get in the survey, the better the data gets. The other big thing is talking, and when I went out, what I didn't mention in here is when I roll this out to our employees, with Bruce Marchese, my Chief Operating Officer, Janice Thomas, Chief of Staff, we did over 30 presentations face-to-face in front of employees using all the guidelines of social distancing. And what I said to them is, you, meaning my employees, are going to get our new riders for us. Why? Because you're going to tell everybody about my Metra. And they're going to tell their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers, and it's going to be so on and so forth moving out. So the answer to the question is anything you can do or anything we can help you do to message to coworkers, elected officials, neighbors, relatives of what we're ready to do right now. That's all over our website. You can certainly help that way. And then in the future, I think the future is really going to be dynamic and exciting. Because there's people out there say, well, your riders aren't going to come back like they ever were. You're right, they absolutely aren't. It's going to be a different set of ridership. It's going to be a different dynamic. And it may take several years for this thing to really get to what we hopefully is called the new normal. So anytime you have the ability to kind of guide people to the website or champion Metra, that's always helpful.
Jim, let me go to a couple of ridership related questions. Ralph Vandenhagen says, excellent presentation. How do you plan the future sizing of Metra for a world where many folks will not be coming downtown daily or may not travel in traditional rush hours?
So the first thing is, like I just talked about, surveys. We're going to really start doing a lot more surveys right now. Right now, it seems like the biggest impediment to people coming downtown is their employer, which is why we're doing the March 11th event, so that we can really start talking with the HR departments. We can start talking, the C-suite people about when your people are ready to come back downtown. This is what Metra's ready to do. The other thing is we really are concentrating now on putting trains back that are very strategic. We know that people love express trains. We love express trains. Express trains really bring a lot of value and time. It's some of the things we're really good at. So one of the things, as we put trains back on and evolve a new schedule, we have a core belief that mostly our old schedules probably won't come back to the way they were. They're going to evolve into some new type schedule. And it's going to come from, what do the riders need? What are the riders doing? Where are they showing up? Where are they not showing up? How do we shift that? And it's going to be very dynamic over the next couple of years. So right now, 1/3 the fleet is actually parked of cars, push-pull cars. 1/3 the fleet is actually parked. I think we're putting 11 cars back in service on February 1st on the Rock Island. We're enhancing some service there. The key is we constantly monitor. And as the certain trains look like they might be getting a little fuller, which they're not yet, when they do, we're going to have to maybe even put 2 trains out. That used to be what one train could do for social distancing, until that's not a consideration. So as we evolve, maybe with the 2 trains out there, it eventually goes to 1 train again, and it's got somewhere of a happy medium between, say, the 7:30 train and the 8 o'clock train. There's no perfect solution here. We're going to be constantly looking at our sister agencies, but more so than anything, trying to listen to our passengers and accommodate the best we can. We clearly can't have a train for every person when they want it. We're not Uber. But we clearly want to understand what the passengers need. And some of the biggest things that we hear right now are targeting, obviously, the traditional rush hours, getting downtown by a certain time so they can get to work, and then leaving downtown at a certain time, and having midday options. That's a very big key component. Even today, with a reduced schedule, why some people say I won't ride the Heritage, because we don't have our midday train back up.
Yeah, Jim, somewhat related to that, David Phillips asks, he says, to attract riders back to express service needs to run in full force, but you also need to manage your costs. Is this a time to go to proof of payment fare collection with 1-person crews?
The answer to that's going to be not right now. So one of the things with proof of payment is you actually have to have a way of buying a ticket before you get on the train, and that's very limited right now here at Metra. In the next several months, we hope to be bringing to the board a procurement for ticket vending machines. If approved, we'll move forward on that. We'll replace our oldest ticket vending machines, and then we'll go ahead and we'll start enhancing some of the other places and doing some pilots with regard to that. Once a passenger has the ability under Title VI, cash and credit card, Apple Pay, Google Pay, however you want to pay, of actually getting their fare product before they get on the train, then you can move to a proof of payment system. That's the only way you can really get there. Otherwise, people can get on the train and say, here's my 500 pennies. I want to ride the train, and we have to have a way to accept that right now today. The other thing I think is, the express trains are something people want back, but you're right. It's the expense side of it. And the expense side of this thing right now is once again dynamically different than our counterparts at CTA. We reduced our service down to 55% when we saw the ridership collapsing. Like I stated, the lowest day was April 16th. Since then, we've come back as high as 12%. Some of the lines are at 15%. These are still horrible numbers. You just cannot put all of our trains out there and control costs. So running last year by not filling certain jobs and having other employee programs where we're combining jobs, and then of course the fuel savings and the labor savings of not running the trains, we netted a little over $100 million in save last year, which means that's $100 million of the CARES money last year we didn't have to burn through. So as we have that money available this year, it's going to give us more options. We're hopeful. We know that under the current administration, they did sign some legislation late in December that looks to net the region $486 million. In the next 2 months, we anticipate the RTA is going to start doling that out and figure out what percentage Metra gets. Depending how much of that money, we call it CARES 2 money, it's probably got a better name, but once that money starts coming in, we can start once again balancing out where can we be running some pilots and running some trains that we hope to attract riders back, yet we're going to be losing money on, and balance that out with the monies that's available for us. And that hopefully is going to start happening in the next couple of months.
Jim, related to that, another schedule-related question from Emmanuel Horowitz asking, are you envisioning, as several other major commuter rail operators that have the ultimate new normal, I got to reread this, sorry. Are you envisioning, as several other major commuter rail operators may have, do you envision seeing more midday and weekend service relative to less peak hour, peak direction traditional service? Let me know if I need to repeat that.
No, I get it. I totally get it. I'm going to say, I see us coming back to having a similar service pattern with regard to rush hour. The trains may be shorter, they may not be as frequent, but definitely once of the things that people want, the express trains from where they're at, the busiest stations downtown, that kind of thing. I do see us having a more physical presence during the midday. In an ideal world, so I only have I have 1.5 ideal worlds. The ideal world is the Metro Electric, where we don't cross grade crossings and we have no freight. Rock Island, we touch a little bit of freight, but we really don't have the infrastructure to run as enhanced service as we want. All the other lines that we have to cross freight traffic, that becomes an impediment. We'd love to start experimenting, and I'm trying to work with one of our partners to try something what I'll call regional rail, to that point where maybe trains are much more frequent. Maybe they're every half hour. During rush hour, they're every 15 minutes, and gives people the ability to know that there's always going to be a train for them to come. Not as fast as rapid transit service, but definitely more enhanced than the 1 or 2 hour windows we have now. And the weekend thing, I think, is incredibly insightful. So right now we're running Sunday service on both Saturday and Sunday. Just a little bit of cost savings. When the time's right, we'll start ramping that back up. We have a new fare product out there that launched. I think it actually launches in February 1. It'll be $7 for Saturday, $7 for Sunday. So it's a little bit of a break from someone who only was using a train one day. And then we still have electronically the $10 weekend pass. But that was where we were starting to see the best ridership growth pre-COVID. I think people starting to recognize, hey, I can get places with Metra on the weekends with some enhanced service. Last summer, we did a pilot with the, summer of 16, we did a pilot, or 19, we did a pilot with the UP Northwest. We added about 10 extra trains on Saturdays and Sundays, and we saw 30% growth. And that's because that frequency of service was the impediment to people using trains. So to answer your question, absolutely, I see us enhancing where we can midday service and where we can weekend service.
Another marketing question from Scott Sigmund. He wonders, what was the engagement with the underlying railroads, UP, BN, et cetera, in the My Metra campaign, if any?
You know, there was not much engagement there with them on the thought process of how to build it. There's been engagement with them on the rollout. So the people at the BN fully jumped on board. Bruce went over there, did My Metra events with them, threw a bunch of My Metra stuff their way, really trying to get them to be as a family member as one can be, being on a different railroad, but still wearing the Metra badge. Unfortunately, Union Pacific is a different story, and it's not the same story. Union Pacific right now, for various different reasons, does not want to engage at the same level that BN does. We do have some messaging that goes away, but unfortunately, Union Pacific just at this time is not engaging in that way.
There is a question related to Union Pacific from Payson Wild, wondering if Metra's issues with the UP will likely to be resolved in 2021. Will a resolution likely result in Metra taking over commuter train operations on UP dispatched property?
Yeah, so you need another hour and a half for me to actually answer that question. So I'll just give you the quick answer. You know, we want a resolution as bad as UP does, but we want the resolution, of course, to mirror our core values. And our core values are, we represent the taxpayers. We represent Northeast Illinois. We don't represent shareholders. And UP has a different belief. They obviously have shareholders, and they don't represent exactly taxpayers. So they have a core belief on some of the things. And so there's two lawsuits, unfortunately, out there. One where Union Pacific suing us for a definition of common carrier obligation. You could read up on that sometime in the history books. Hopefully we'll make some history with that. The other side of that thing is we had to unfortunately sue Union Pacific more recently than not because of their inaction. And one of our concerns is our passengers on UP trains and the conductors not walking the trains. I personally had to testify last week in front of the judge, and it's our core belief, my core belief, that our passengers riding on those trains right now are at a disservice from the Union Pacific, just by the inherent function of the conductor walking through the train. That's money aside, is absolutely money aside. There's a lawsuit in place for breach of contract on money.
Jim, I'm going to steer to a couple of equipment related questions, and then we'll get back to some of the others as well. Two people have asked, Ernie Norman and Andy Fox have asked about the cost effectiveness of buying new versus rebuilding, and what are some of the general cost comparisons of new versus rebuild?
Yeah, so I guess we can touch that in two different areas. So there's obviously Metra's got a lot of cars, and we rebuild our own cars. I think last year we were doing about 38 cars. We just enhanced our 49th Street rebuild facility to actually crank up the amount of cars we're rebuilding. And just to touch another point from the expense side, one of the ways we've been able to control the expense so much is we're able to shift operating people when we lay down 1/3 the fleet into capital positions, into these capitally funded jobs where they're rebuilding cars. So we're enhancing a lot of our capital programs right now. So to buy a brand new passenger cars, we're going to be a little over $3 million. To rebuild it on the outside, if we were to send it out, it's going to be somewhere in about the $1.1 to $1.3 million range. All depends on the age of the car, the scope of the work, you know, what has to be changed out in the car, and then the availability of the material. So we're rebuilding right now our 2002 to 2009 Nippon Sharyo fleet to the tune of about $750,000. So we're saving somewhere, the taxpayer, in the neighborhood of maybe $500,000, $550,000 per car. We're keeping those jobs in Illinois, good union jobs in Illinois. We're keeping those federal tax dollars in Illinois. We're not sending it to another state. The difference with replacement gets into the fact that the 1980 to 1953 cars just, once again, don't have that enhanced safety features. They're not crash worthy. They're not built with the smoke and flame requirements of a modern car. They don't have the enhanced security. They're not ADA compliant and accessible. So the enhancement of the fleet right now, and I guess this can get to maybe another point, is the reason we asked for 200. Even before COVID, 200 was our base order. The board actually approved the contract for up to 500, but instructed us to come back to them anything beyond 200, which makes all the sense in the world. So today, as I run rush hour service at 60% of capacity, we're running about 560 cars. So 560 cars means I'm still already running 80 buds and Pullmans. And as I said, we're going to add 11 more cars in about 2 weeks. So we're going to be up to 90 Pullmans. And as we start adding service, we're still going to have a great need for the buds and Pullmans. It's our belief, and once again, as we presented to the board, it's time to start investing. I love our board member, John Zedeker. He said the best day to plant a tree that you need today was 20 years ago. The next best day to plant that tree is today. And that's what we did at the board meeting about a week ago. We planted that tree so that 4.5 years from now, we start seeing the fruits of this labor and start bringing it in. I know that's kind of a complicated answer, but the fact of the matter is we could rebuild that 1953 car again. Federally, we have to then keep it for 10 years. That's the way the money works. And so then that car will be 75 years old, non-ADA compliant, not crash-worthy compliant, and all the other things I just talked about. We really feel this is a balance. The 200 cars is a great balance between continuing to dump money into cars that already went beyond useful life. They're already 42 years old and older. No one else in the country is even running these other than some museums. And this is a great investment in a Metra's future in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Jim. I might get to another equipment question, but I've got a question from Bon French. And he says, Jim, you mentioned offhand the greatly increased speed of many drivers on the roads. I've seen this firsthand on the Eisenhower. It is truly scary now, and I've never felt that before. I've seen so many near misses. Is there any sense from the authorities why this is happening and when it might stop? Further, there appears to be an increase in shooting on the expressways, and I'm more worried than ever about driving downtown. I can't wait to get back to Metra.
Well, Bon, you're welcome back any day, $10, and you can ride the system all you want. I have people that tell me sometimes, hey, I love reading a book when I was on my Metra train. I just don't have a reason to ride anymore. I'm like, well, take your book and for $10, ride around the system. It's still you can still read your book on a train. So 2 points on this. We've been monitoring a lot of different things. As COVID occurred, we know everything shifted. And one of the things we were monitoring was actually traffic congestion as an indicator of maybe when riders come back. This was back in May and June last year. Clearly, there's not and I've been to a few states recently. There's not a state I don't go into that there's signs up, including Illinois, that says, slow down. I think I was in Tennessee a couple of days ago or weeks ago, and they actually says, driving fast is not the new normal. And so I think it's everywhere, Bon. The fact is, as they told the authorities, hey, you're going to stop engaging people face to face, people started recognizing that nobody's getting pulled over anymore. And so I can't answer that question wholeheartedly. I can tell you just talking with the authorities that I talk with, which is in Chicago, that it's a big concern that the speeds are ramping up. And I think there's some people that believe as congestion builds, the speeds will come back down. The truth of the matter is I'm on those roads every day. I come into the office every day and I'm on those roads, and it is just amazing to me. It's amazing to me, the Autobahn that we have out there. And truthfully, you can tell when something bad's happened because the fact that bumping somebody at 20 miles an hour is not the same effect of cutting someone off at 85 or 90. But Bon's welcome back anytime.
Welcome back to the train, Bon. There are a couple of questions related to late night rides, riding in winter, and stations. So I'm going to combine them. So, the questions are essentially, how is Metra working with local towns for more police safety protection? And are there plans to open more stations so riders can wait out trains inside? And what's being done to make sure that they're clean and safe?
Yeah, so three-pronged question. When you open up the book called Metra, there's this chapter in there called Stations, and it's a whole chapter because it's so complicated. Metra owns a portion of the stations. Some of the stations are owned by municipalities. Some of the stations are owned and operated and managed by the freight railroads. Some of those stations, the parking lots of municipalities, some of them are Metra's contracted people to maintain it. It is such a hybrid, you literally have to open up a book to get to it. So we have policies in winter that certain stations stay open. They're on timer locks, and it depends where you're at. If it's Elgin, the Elgin station may be one of the ones that's controlled by the municipality, it may be controlled by Metra. I don't have the book open right now. If there's specific ones, they can send in those questions to the Metra Responds and just ask. But what we've done, because the second part of this is the police presence. We've taken over the policing of the BN and the UP. We also have all of our 7 other lines. So our police are riding trains, responding to complaints from passengers, responding to concerns from conductors, and clearly are stretched thin on the system. What our chief of police, Joe Perez, has done, and he did this early on, was create a good working relationship with the county and certainly with the local municipalities to deal with some of the things that can happen at the stations. It's not a simple answer. When there's volumes of people there, we see this at CTA stations right now. When there's volumes of people there, there's less likely that crime and problems exist because of the constant flow of people. CTA tells us one of their biggest concerns is it's a spiral effect. The later in the night it goes, the more and more bad things may happen, say at a station, the less and less people want to use the service. Therefore, the less and less people accessing the service at that time of the night, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So cameras can only do so much. They can catch it in the rears a lot of times, but it's hard sometimes to catch it in the front. It's not the best answer, but clearly with 242 stations in the system, we're counting on a lot of partners to really assist with that. If there are specific ones with some concerns, send them in, and then the customer service team will look at what we can and can't do, or at least message it out to the communities.
Jim, it's 1 o'clock. I want to make sure you have time for a few more questions.
Absolutely. I can take a few more.
Great. Okay. Marcus Garza asks, is there any aspect of the marketing campaign that targets minority communities, such as marketing materials in different languages? And if not, is that something Metra has looked into?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'll touch that on 3 different ways. So the answer right off the bat, the initial marketing campaign that we did right now did not target multiple languages, because really the initial part of the campaign right now was targeted at the media and starts really targeted at employers, hopefully messaging to employees. Metra by law has to have the ability to do different languages. And so we've got a contract for the most popular languages here in the region. People can call up and get direct translation. We have been talking about starting to put a lot of our signage out in Spanish at certain stations, and really using our marketing tools for that and doing it in bilingual out there. We also know that there's multiple other languages in the region. From an equity perspective, clearly the campaign goes everywhere. But I forgot to mention, which is an exciting thing, so I'll mention it now. Our board approved an IGA with the County of Cook, and we executed it. And on January 4th this year, we launched what's called the Fair Transit South Cook pilot program. What that did, I'm talking about an equity piece and trying to really deal with COVID, and this was done way before COVID, but really trying to figure out, working even with our marketing consultant firm and Cook County's marketing consultant firm, how much does price pay into some of the decline in ridership we've been traditionally seeing. So on Metra Electric and Rock Island, starting January 4th, all fares on those lines were reduced to the reduced fare, the published reduced fare. And so right now, it's only been in progress for 2 weeks. There's not enough movement on it to have any, discernible path. We're going to meet with the county every quarter as we go through this pilot, but we're clearly looking at to make sure that we have a good equity footprint throughout the system. We like to believe that this pilot with Cook County can become a base model, not just for the rest of the region, potentially, 5 years down the road for the rest of the country.
Thank you, Jim. I had a question I wanted to ask here. I've got to find it again. Oh, another question from Ron Warnow. With respect to your comment relating to the expanding suburban areas, are you working with any TNCs regarding first last mile coordination?
The answer right now is no. We have reached out to TNCs. We were actually partnering with Uber prior to the pandemic. Right now, our biggest push until that happens, I think this is a little bit cart before the horse, but the biggest push that we're trying to do right now is actually with realtors. A lot of, we all know this. I mean, it happens, but within about a quarter mile to a half-mile radius of every metro station, property values tend to accelerate because of the metro station there. So we're really starting to target people that are moving in that general region through realtors, through the community leaders, to really start targeting that. If you're new to the region and you haven't thought about Metra, here's Metra. The TNC's first mile, last mile, that's something we'll start tackling once we start getting some of the people back. Right now, we're forecasting going from 10% ridership to about 40% ridership by the end of the year. So there's going to be ample opportunity. TNCs themselves, this is something I ask on about a monthly basis, are hurting bad. Now they're hurting. They put protocols in place just like we did, but they're not as easy. You don't grab your phone and there's like 50 of them waiting to come take you anywhere. It just doesn't exist anymore. The amount of people that are sitting out there waiting to get that 1 or 2 or 3 rides during their 3 hour, 4 hour driving period are just so limited. And because of that, supply and demand has driven price up. In the beginning, it made a lot of sense. And I'm not saying to me, it's a supply and demand thing. As people have a need to get to the train station, I think the TNCs will start seeing an increase of their use. But when you start talking about partnership, one of the things that people start alluding to is, hey, can I pay one fare here and I get the whole trip in? The first component of that, I think, is going to be us working with Pace in the suburbs to try to get some kind of fare transition there. And eventually, if that technology becomes useful, then maybe we could start looking at with the TNCs again as well. It's not out of the question. It's certainly not on the front burner right now.
Thank you. John Plant wants to know if Metra's received any feedback or metrics on the South Cook County Service Enhancement Project.
No, John, good hearing it from you. Good seeing that you're still checking in on us. No feedback yet. It's too early. We'll have monthly meetings with them. I think the first one's scheduled second week of February to kind of hear what we're seeing. Other than when we kicked it off and launched it, we saw a lot of public feedback and saying, thank you, I'm glad you did it. But nothing since it's kicked off really monumental to report.
Thanks. This may be repetitive. I hope it's not repetitive of an earlier question I asked, but Richard Gill wanted to know if Metra is engaging in any COVID lessons learned information exchanges with other commuter rail systems. I know we asked you if you're talking to them and you said yes. I don't know if we asked the specific question.
Yeah, so I mean, when COVID first hit, that was the first thing. What happened to your ridership? What are you doing about it? And then what enhancements you made? I don't think there's anywhere in the country right now that hasn't at least put hand sanitizers in the stations, if not on the train cars like Metra did. I don't think there's anywhere in the country right now that doesn't really do the fogging and the high touch and the wipe downs and all the things you need to do to keep the train car itself clean. And then as far as the messaging campaign, we're one of the only ones doing it. We're one of the only ones in the country that we understand from other agencies that actually has an active campaign running to message to people. Most of them are just counting on their website in word of mouth right now. We reached out, and like I said, I'm on a lot of different, I'm in APTA, I'm the co-chair of the commuter subcommittee. I'm the chairman of the Commuter Rail Coalition, a little similar but different. And we're constantly having those conversations. But it's been about, I'd say, since September that anything new and innovative has really come out of any of the other agencies. It's almost like we're all ready to get everybody back. We're just waiting on the employers to start slowly trickling people back. Once again, the goal is not, we know it's not a light switch. We know they're not all coming back tomorrow. The goal is to start getting people back and then figuring out, are they a 2-day-a-week rider? Are they a 3-day-a-week rider? One of our huge initiatives that we're going to probably target later this year is new fare products. To really give passengers much greater flexibility and some bang for their buck. That probably won't happen until we start seeing ridership climb.
I'm going to get back to some equipment related questions. Combining two questions. What is the seating capacity of the new cars? And what is the split between cab cars and coaches? And let's add to that, will the cars have new electrical outlets at all seats and Wi-Fi throughout all cars?
So a lot of good questions there. So the seating capacity per car is about 10 extra seats per car relative to its, say, comparator car for the Metra fleet. So there's about 10 more seats on a new style cab car versus a Metra cab car. There's 10 more seats on a trailer versus our trailer, so on and so forth. As far as electronics and personal electronics and plugs, and I understand they might even have almost USB adapters on every single seat. That's the plan, but it's not fully determined. One of the things we are going to do is we're going to engage passengers again within this car build. The concepts are there, but the specifics still aren't there. And that's on purpose. We didn't want just to come in and say, here's your new car, take it or leave it. We wanted really to start getting some feedback. And so we've always understood that electronics and plugs and outlets and things of that nature are definitely something. The cars will be what I'll call Wi-Fi capable. The question is, who's paying for the Wi-Fi? The question is that something that we're going to do? Ideally, we know that's something people want. Before COVID hit, we were really starting to try targeting some partnerships out there to try getting the partners to pay for the Wi-Fi so that when you flip on your device, maybe a friend like, say, rhymes with Mamazon, might pull up, and then you could take a look at that and look at their little ad for 30 seconds, which gives them their bang for their buck while they're paying for the Wi-Fi on the train. So we're going to continue to look for partners. Obviously, right now, with very low sets of eyes on the train, it's not the time exactly to get a partnership, but it's my understanding that the cars are going to come completely enhanced with all the latest and greatest. The other thing that you asked about was the split. On the base order of 200, it's 30 cabs, 170 trailer. It can be modified in the option orders out if we see a need for more cabs.
Are there plans to also retrofit the cars that are not being immediately replaced in any capacity?
I guess the question would be with what? We have Wi-Fi right now. I want to say it's on like 70 cars. It's not the best Wi-Fi. It is free. We are paying the bill on that. And so we put it's an orange decal on the outside of the car. We targeted mostly the newer cars because those are the ones that are in service, obviously, somewhat on the electric district, of course, as well. But right now, as we start figuring out the finances of the near future, we want to really take a look. If the customer surveys really start coming in and start saying, the one reason I'm not riding Metra is you guys don't have the free Wi-Fi in the trains, that may be something we certainly want to consider. But that old survey results where you had a fair amount of people saying, I want it, but it wasn't one of the biggest determining factors to be here. And so as we try to figure out what the financials of the next couple of years are, we're going to take that into consideration.
One more car replacement related question from Greg Kamika. With Caltran doing their electrification project, has Metra looked at purchasing any of their cars when they become surplus?
We did. We actually have an agreement with them to purchase up to 50 of their cars. We did send people out to California to look at their cars. We're going to take that into consideration depending on how the new car order is going, the needs of the fleet as we move forward. We could bring those cars in and put them into a rehab cycle. The bad part about those cars is I want to say they're 1990 to 1996 vintage, and they've never been through an overhaul. So our goal always is to overhaul the car around the 16-year mark. We clearly have cars that now are well beyond, and our intent is to retire them. So if we brought the cars in from California, they have two distinct things that they're going to need. One is an overhaul. They've never had an overhaul. And the other thing is they have a completely different braking system. So either we're going to have to invest some money in there to standardize the system, or we'd have to run them in unique different areas. It's not that it's not compatible with the other cars, but they have a completely different truck and a completely different braking system. But to answer that question, prior to us ever getting a new car contract in place, we actually did engage California, and we have an agreement that we would have first right of refusal to buy up to 50 of their cars when the electrification takes place.
Jim, that just demonstrates your immense knowledge in what these other systems are running. So thank you for the answer. Tom Murtha from CMAP asks if the enhanced cleaning has increased dwell time necessary for trains.
No, yeah, not at all. So unfortunately, because we're not running the type of rush hour service, we did pre-COVID, the enhanced cleaning's mostly done at night. We did do this thing, I'll call it the heavy duty clean, where we literally got in with steamers and cleaned everything from top to bottom. The cars look immaculate. The customer compliments that came in were just overwhelming. And so our big goal now is to make sure those cars shouldn't go any more than 6 months without entering a cycle where they get that super enhanced cleaning with the steaming. But the actual sanitation type cleaning, we're using a fogger. That's done at night. And then all the high touch services are really what the coach cleaners do when they're downtown before the train turns back out, if it's not going to the yard. Right now, the dwell times are, anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. And hate to say it, but we're only using 1 or 2 or 3 cars. So it's not that bad in a lot of cases with any respect to turn times.
All right, Jim, based on timing, I've got time for 2 more questions. And one is a service related question. It says, what is the basis for Metra's daily decisions regarding the service to be provided, number of rail cars, frequency of service, routes to be operated, et cetera? And I think that's probably being asked in this environment that we're living in right now.
Yeah, so nothing changes very fast, right? So even our ridership numbers aren't changing that dramatically. Initially, when we went from phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4 and all the different things that they came up with, we staged extra, what we call shadow trains for every single morning rush hour, just in case everybody showed up. We actually put people in all the parking lots where we felt that there could be some impact on ridership, so that we never put anybody in that position where the trains were overcrowded. We never saw it happen. So as we went from phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4, we never needed those extra trains. If they ran empty. So as one of the realities we have right now is it's going to happen slowly. It's not like, hey, today there's a Bears game or a Cubs game. It's going to be like today, company XYZ in the building 3 doors down said they want 25% of their workforce to come back, and a portion of that workforce may or may not ride Metra. So we know organically it's going to happen very slowly. So we look at ridership numbers. We listen obviously to the conductors. Right now, the first element is always going to be to open more cars or add more cars to the train. A lot of our trains right now, we're running with only 4 or 5 cars open. I think our heaviest train right now is 340 people. That one's running with 8 cars open. So there's plenty of room on the trains. And what we've been trying to do is trying to do some experimental trains. So we actually have a Southwest Service Express. We've never had one before. There's actually one today. There's probably not 50, 60 people on the train. But we'll see where that kind of goes. Our latest information suggests that we should put back on our 4 o'clock trains, or 4 a.m. trains, for the workers that continue to been coming downtown this entire time. So that's one of the next areas, at least on the BN, we're going to look to put the 4 o'clock back on. We're also looking to do that here in February with the Rock Island trains. It's a constant, there's no playbook for this. So we're using the information that we have every single day, and in projecting out a month from now where we should be. But this is not going to be like where we ever feel like all of a sudden the riders are here and we didn't plan for it properly.
Jim, our last question I'm going to ask from Ernie Norman, who asked Mr. Durwinsky, do you take Metra to work?
I do not. It does not go near where I live. Unfortunately, I don't.
Actually, Hani's here and he would like to ask a question as well. Come on board, Hani.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jim. Very interesting presentation and very helpful answers to the question. I have one, in that same spirit of kind of monitoring what's happening and then providing service as needed. One of the questions that might arise, and you alluded to that earlier, that there's more people moving to the suburbs now, sort of some of these land use changes. Do you kind of envision a situation where perhaps more of your riders are becoming kind of park and ride type riders, as opposed to taking maybe a bus for access, or maybe even taking ride sharing for access, just more of that privacy bubble sort of thing, and then parking, and then the trains are large enough you feel you're able to distance in there. Is that a scenario that you're contemplating?
So I'm going to answer it with kind of like another scenario that kind of pulls this all together. And not that I'm wishing this on anybody, but I envision a scenario where people are told to come back to work. They get in their car because they want that privacy, or the TNC if that's what they want. and they sit in that road out there, not even because it's got bad weather, for 2.5, 3 hours to get to work, or 2.5 to 3 hours to get home. And they're like, you know, this option doesn't work. What other options are available? Whether I just move to the suburb or not. You know, Naperville is an example. 5,900, I think actually 6,300 was our peak, but 5,900 was our numbers right before COVID, daily riders just out of Naperville. It was a 5-year waiting list just to get a parking pass to get in there.
Mhm.
Guess what? There's parking passes available today. So I think as people get into the congestion choke points of, as we've seen that Metra, without Metra, we'd need 27 more lanes of traffic if all 140,000 people were coming downtown. It's going to organically happen. And we want to make sure that we're on your radio, we're in your digital media, we're there as an option. We've made it as easy as possible for you to get downtown. We have some service options that are slowly going to be enhanced. So when you have that unfortunate 2 and 3 hour drive that totally ruined your day coming downtown, that we're the option for
No,
you.
I get that. My point really has to do with just more park and ride, like demand for park and ride. That is parking to the Metra station. And is that going to be maybe a choke point going forward? Because it was already pre-COVID. And again, one scenario might be that as we're getting out of COVID, that there may be more demand, in fact, for the park and ride variety rather than other ways of accessing Metra.
There may, but remember, on that ride portion, they're going to jump on with all those other people that are now in their cars.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there could be, I mean, if you start talking about a land use perspective, I mean, those people parking there, they're going to pay their whatever it is and move on. Ultimately, I think one of the things that we count on is the fact that we're just such a value. We're an experience. We're not just, you want to take a nap on our train, you can do that. You can certainly do that in a park and ride, but you can't do that while you're driving. You can't do work while you're while you're driving. You can make a phone call. You can do that in our non-quiet car. But the experience aspect, when we brought in our, once again, LKH&S from a third party outside perspective, I was just totally blown away by listening to their reasons they ride Metra and what they did with their surveys of why people ride Metra. And so I don't think we're ever going to lose that core part of the business. We are going to lose some people. There's no doubt in my mind that some people are never going to have to go downtown anymore. They can work from home. There's no doubt in my mind that business travel is going to slow down for many, many years. There's no doubt in my mind that congestion at the airport is not going to be what it was pre-COVID for many, many years. But there's also no doubt in my mind that face-to-face communications will eventually come back. It's been proven time and time again. We're functional here. We're just not productive as we could be as a society. And I really think we should be watching Europe and Asia to see what kind of things happening over there, because where business goes over there is certainly going to be a great indicator of what happens over here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you everyone for attending. This has been a great presentation, and I can assure you that Jim has complete support from the board of directors. I can also assure you that he is constantly communicating with the board of directors, and there is a very, very strong relationship between the board and Jim. And as I said earlier, I believe that Metra is blessed to have Jim on board, and particularly his initiative. And Hannah, you will appreciate this. He is a data-driven guy. So, and he loves his data, and he is willing to make decisions, and he is willing to take business risks. We will be announcing the February programs and beyond here shortly as we put them together. And again, to those of you that are still with us, thank you very much. And we have a great January, and please stay safe and healthy during this COVID period.
Happy New Year.
Thank you all. Thank you, Norm. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you again, Jim.
Thanks.
Bye.